Hello and welcome to another episode of Raw Chatter. I am your host, Vicky Midwood, the Human Health Optimizer and Addiction Eliminator. Last week, I was talking about the paradox of control. And so this week, I thought it would be super helpful to do kind of a part two, if you like, a follow-up to what I was sharing on that last episode. So if you haven't listened to it, then go and find it on Spotify or on Apple. It is season 5, episode 15. So today I'm going to be talking about why do we struggle to let go of the stuff that we're not enjoying doing anymore? In other words, why do we stay in our self-sabotaging, health-sabotaging habits, particularly looking at issues around food? So whether it's orthorexia, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, drugs, smoking, gambling, shopping. Why do we find it so difficult to let go of those behaviors, even though they may be causing us to feel upset with ourselves, to feel absolutely fed up of the patterns that we're having to implement day in, day out that feel flipping exhausting? And why is it that we just can't do what seems so easy to say? Why can't we just stop? Well, it would be great, wouldn't it, if it was that simple? But it's not, because we've got to take into account that it's a biological, physiological, emotional, neurological issue that we're looking at. Your body and your brain work like an orchestra. And when we create habits or patterns of behavior and patterns of thinking, you may have heard the term, what gets fired together gets wired together. When we have a thought, a feeling, and then that is kind of cemented by an action, all of those three things come together. And if you like, it's a little bit like wearing a path on grass. And we've all seen it. You know, when you've had somebody who for decades has walked along the same path and maybe cut the corner off a triangle of grass. And we all end up walking along that same path, don't we? Because somebody else has created it. Now, if none of us continue to walk on that path, eventually it would reseed and the grass would grow, and you probably wouldn't know that that path was there, except you would. Because even years and years, if not decades later, there would probably be a faint outline of where that original path was, even in the new grass. And that's a little bit like how our brain cements our feelings and our behavior patterns. And so we don't ever fully let go of all of those hardwired emotions, feelings, and actions. But what we can do is we can stop reinforcing them. In other words, we can stop walking along that path. We can choose a different path. But the problem with doing that is your brain is rewarded by you doing stuff that is easy, predictable, known, and familiar. Why am I saying it's rewarded? Well, we said this last week. Your brain just wants to conserve energy, right? It will take the least energy producing option to do anything. In other words, if it's got something that's automatic that it doesn't even have to think about, in other words, you're not conscious, it's going to go with that always. Now, for the majority of people who are following the pattern of restricting and saying the same sentences over and over again, I can't eat that. I don't eat that. I'm not allowed to have that. You're fat. You're stupid. You're not good enough. You're ugly. If we keep repeating those things to ourselves in our heads or out loud, or we say them to other people, then we are basically walking along that same path. We're reinforcing the same thoughts. When we say those things, it creates a feeling, or it creates another kind of almost tsunami of more negative thoughts. And therefore, we then have a behavior that goes along with that. It may be that we avoid certain foods. It may be that we restrict even harder. It may be that we decide we're going to just numb out because it all feels just too overwhelming. Hence, we turn to a cigarette or a drink or some drugs. What we've got to remember is our habit patterns have been created as a coping mechanism. And then we have created this habit loop. We have a cue, we have a trigger, and then we have a reward. Now, it seems silly for us to say, well, there's a reward for us doing the thing that is sabotaging how we are feeling and how we are thinking. But in effect, it does, because the reward is we know it. It's predictable and it's familiar. So even if it's painful, we're going to keep on doing it. Why? Because our brain tells us that change is going to feel too unbearable, too hard to cope with. We just won't be able to do it. We will fail. We won't be good enough. And often those feelings of failure and of not being good enough and not being able to do it are the very reason that we created these coping mechanisms in the first place. So you can see how this loop just goes on and on. It's kind of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And therefore, the easiest thing for your brain to do is to say, do you know what? Let's not bother. Do you know what? It's not that bad. Do you know what? Actually, I'm over-exaggerating how hard it is and how terrible I feel. Honestly, I'm okay. I can just keep on doing the thing that I'm doing. And a lot of people do that. And a year becomes 2. And 2 becomes 3. And before you know it, it's been a decade. And then before you know it, it's been 2. And for a lot of people I work with, it's been 4 or even 5 decades of them convincing themselves that they can't change. It's going to be too uncomfortable. It's going to be too hard. And then the biggest thing, that kind of unsaid fear, the elephant in the room then is, who will I be if I'm not ... if I'm not anorexic, if I'm not bulimic, if I'm not a smoker, if I'm not a drinker, if I'm not a gambler? Because we start to wear our habits as an identity. We tell ourselves that is who we are. Now, often, and this is where it can get a tad confusing, we do that because it allows us to feel different. And the irony of this is, and it's a bit like the paradox of control. So many people particularly who struggle with bulimia or anorexia, they are adamant that they are doing it because they want to feel and look the same as other people. They don't want to be different. And yet the very behavior patterns that they exhibit make sure that they stand out and they are noticed and they are different. And that is the irony of it, because the more you are the person who is pushing around a couple of leaves of lettuce on your plate and everybody else is eating pizza and pasta, well, you're going to be noticed, right? Whether you want to be noticed or not, you're going to be. The more you tell people that you have already eaten, and you know darn well that you haven't, and you are sneaking food, and people know that food disappears when you're around, but yet you'd never seem to be eating, you're going to be noticed. Now, that's the person who keeps pinching food, right? She thinks nobody knows. We all do. And then the irony of it is, the more you try and pretend that people don't know what you're doing, that you're getting away with it, the more you're deluding yourself, because people do notice when you are behaving strangely, when you are hiding stuff, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether you're lying. There are tells, there are giveaways. Now, I will hold my hand up absolutely and say I was totally deluded. I genuinely convinced myself that I was that special and different person and people didn't know what I was doing. I was genuinely deluded. Of course people did. I would go in the bathroom and I would run the bath and I would pray the late radio even loud, so that people couldn't hear me throwing up. They knew what I was doing. Those telltale cues were there. Ah, she's in the bathroom. Ah, the music's on. Ah, the water's running. We know what you're doing. And this is the silly part of it, is that the more we fool ourselves, the more we lie to ourselves, the worse we feel about what we're doing, the more we need to keep doing the very thing. Because by doing that, it gives us ridiculously a sense of comfort, a sense of predictability, a sense of familiarity. And this is how we get trapped in these habit loops that I mentioned earlier. Now, we've got to learn that we can break these habit loops. But as I said on the last one, it has to come from a place of, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Because like anything new, when we learn anything, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to use driving as an example because a lot of people do learn to drive. And for pretty much everybody, the first time, the second time, the third time you get in that car and you drive out on the road with other traffic, those first few times, it's scary. Right? There's so many things that you have to remember, and you've got an instructor in your ear hole reminding you of the highway code, and you're supposed to be looking in the mirror and looking behind you and looking at the side of you and remembering to indicate and which gear is where and which one's the clutch and which one. There's a lot going on. But what do? Right? We go back again, don't we? We go back again and we have another lesson. And then we have another one, and we keep on repeating that until, fast forward, if you're my age, you've been driving 20 or 30 years, you get in the car and you don't even think about it. This stuff has been automated. So when we get into these habit loops, your brain is trying to do you a favor by habituating, automating what you do. The problem with that is those automated behavior habits also go oftentimes with automated thought patterns and feelings. And those are the things that keep us stuck. Actually, behavior patterns themselves on their own are not that challenging to change. Yes, it'll be uncomfortable. If anybody here who is listening was a smoker and is no longer a smoker, I used those words on purpose. I didn't say has given up. I said was a smoker and is no longer. Yeah, i.e. your identity was I'm a smoker. Now your identity is I'm not a smoker. I don't smoke. You will have found, as I did, that you kind of don't quite know what to do with your hands. There were associations that we had with a cigarette. For me, it was getting into the car and driving. I know for some people, particularly for my dad, it was every time he was on the phone. He had an association. Now, I know, because now I understand what smoking does, is that it really was about him getting a sense of relief and being able to manage his stress in conversations. And my dad was great in conversations, but he was quite hard at driving deals. And so therefore there would have been an automatic fight or flight response going on in his body. And he didn't consciously go, oh, I know. I'm going to tame my nervous system by smoking whilst I'm on the phone having a potentially difficult conversation. That's not what happened. It became an association. Phone, fag, literally was what it was. And for a lot of people, it could be a cup of coffee. And I'm using a cigarette as an example because it's just an easy one for people to kind of latch onto. Nowadays, it tends to be that it's the phone. It's not a fag. It's the phone that people pick up. And that is a distraction from our kind of inner distress, our inner turmoil. They do different things. When we turn to like controlling our body size through manipulating food or exercise, we are essentially numbing our emotions, because we're taking all of our focus onto something else and we're just not allowing those emotions any space. But what we've got to take on board is that when we are suppressing our emotions, when we're not allowing them to do what they're meant to do, to come out, to be expressed, we are going to find that they will come out in behavior patterns. There will be some kind of expression somewhere, and it's usually how we act out. Whether that is using drugs, whether it is smoking, and I'm not just talking cigarettes, it could be smoking something else. But we're looking for a way of kind of silencing those emotions or just being able to manage them better. The problem is we're not managing them at all. We're just not giving them any airtime. And so we're suppressing them. And what happens then usually is that the body starts to scream. So there's a phrase that, the body screams when the head is silenced, because it's trying to hold in emotions, and our emotions are held in our cells. And you may or may not have heard me talk about doing some shaking to help to release pent-up stress, trauma that is trapped in our cells. And this stuff gets carried down through generations and generations. So sometimes the cellular trauma that we are holding on to is not even ours. It could be our parents or grandparents that it's coming from. But unless we can start to understand just what it is that we're scared of, then we're unlikely to want to be able to open the door to changing the behavior patterns that we have now gotten into a habit of repeating, because we got to remember they did serve a purpose at one time, and your brain remembers that, right? It was a coping mechanism that provided you with something positive at one point. Unfortunately, with consistent and continued repetition, now what was something that was serving you is now something that is harming you. And often it's making you dislike yourself more than you did before you even began doing the thing that you hoped would help you to like yourself more. And so we're back into this whole paradox and irony kind of mentality. So this is where we've got to recognize that our thoughts are not true. Our feelings, absolutely, physical sensations in our body are very real. And if we can tune into those, and if we can understand what is going on there, it's massively helpful to us knowing just what it is that we are suppressing. Because sometimes we don't necessarily make a connection with how we are feeling and what actually is going on in our subconscious, but also in our kind of wider environment. We tend to be kind of very blinkered in what we focus on. And we think that maybe the thing that we're trying to do right now that is causing us to feel uncomfortable is the problem. And you might have heard me say this before on previous episodes, but the thing is never the thing. There's usually something that's underneath that, and often underneath that, and often underneath that. And usually what it boils down to is being scared and not being able to handle, to manage our thoughts and our feelings together. And they usually do come as a package. As I said, it's kind of chicken and egg. What comes first, the feeling or the thought or the feeling? Well, yes, is the answer. Sometimes we get the feeling first and we kind of have to work out, what am I thinking? Other times we know what we're thinking. And then it's like, okay, so that explains why I feel tight in my chest or in my throat, or I feel nauseous. We have to be a little bit detective, and we've got to recognize that changing any automated habit is not going to be easy to begin with. One of the things that any fitness instructor will tell you, and for those of you who don't know, my other business and my first kind of foray into the world of being self-employed was as a class instructor and a fitness instructor. And I would see people who were what I would call seasoned class participants, usually older ladies in their kind of 40s, 30s, 40s, mid-30s, 40s, who'd done a lot of other people's classes and had obviously not necessarily been taught what was good form. They just did the moves, and nobody actually said, that's not really ideally how you execute that move in the best way. What do I mean? As a simple example, so I would see ladies squatting and they would just bend the knees, and then they thought that was a squat. And because in a class scenario, it can be very difficult to go up to individual people and spend a little bit of time trying to get them to do the exercise in the way that is going to feel as it should. It's easy to just let it go. Now, it's harder to untrain a bad habit than it is to create a new habit from scratch, which is actually good news. Okay. But If we are thinking about stopping something or letting something go, that is going to feel much more difficult than going, hey, let me create a new habit. Let me create new associations. And when we create new habits and new associations, those old ones just kind of get forgotten about. And that is the easiest way to go about habit change. But if it was just behavior, it would be dead straightforward, wouldn't it? Yeah. I don't do that in association with that. So let's take an example that I've already given. I don't light up a cigarette when I'm on the phone. Let's take my dad's example. What I do is I have a glass of water and I have a sip of water before I pick up the receiver. So we're now creating a brand new habit, right? It's a different thing. Yes, you're still holding something in your hand, but it's not something in between your two fingers now. It's something that you need with your whole hand. So physiologically, it's different. Your brain's got to be conscious and go, oh, glass, not cigarette. You are then going to recognize that you're not going to be continuously puffing on the thing, but you could, if you wanted, keep sipping. So it's not massively different, but it is new enough to break the old habit of phone and cigarette. And so this is where, if you're working with somebody who can help you to get really clear on what are the minutiae of your habits, how can we help you to make a shift that is not so big that it is scary and overwhelming, and immediately your brain's going to go, no, I can't do it, right? It kind of goes, all right, you know what? It's pretty close to what I already know. That's going to be all right. I can handle that. We're kind of just expanding very gently our comfort zone. And I am not a fan of jumping right out of our comfort zone. I like to think of the comfort zone a bit like an elastic band, a big circular elastic band. And let's just say that our comfort zone is this big, right? And we happily sit in here. And we can do for the rest of our lives if we want to, but we're unlikely to get all of the things that we say we want if we do this. The only way we're going to be able to grow and to feel that we're fulfilling our potential and that we are actually doing more of the stuff that lights us up and that we really love is to do this, is to expand the comfort zone. So I am not suggesting that you jump right out, right, into kind of outer space and the unknown. That's way too scary, right? I know some people do that and they like to do that. And that is part of the kind of the thrill of how far can I push myself? But when it comes to changing habits, especially around stuff to do with addictive habits that are harmful, the best thing we can do is go, right, how big is my comfort zone? Where are the edges? Can I just expand slightly? Yeah. And you know what? Here's the thing. Sometimes what we'll find is we only need to expand it just a tiny, tiny bit for us to feel a massive difference in our emotional state. It doesn't have to be this. Okay. And that's where I believe so many people go wrong when it comes to breaking free or letting go of habits that harm, is because they try and make a big leap. They try and do something that is almost a grand gesture to kind of go, hey, look at me now, see what I can do. Aren't I incredible? Well, chances are you're not going to be able to stick at it because it's going to just feel too difficult. When we do too much too quickly for where we are right now currently, we are going to elicit those very feelings, those very emotions that we wanted to numb by restricting or by throwing up food, that we wanted to kind of relieve ourselves from by smoking or drinking or doing drugs, or that we want to distract from by picking up the phone and just whiling away the hours and scrolling. So why would we want to do that? We wouldn't, would we? That would be crazy, right? Why would we do something to stop us from doing a habit that's actually going to make us want to do the habit even more? And that's why people think that this stuff is hard, because they try and do it far too quickly and in a way that is going to make them feel overwhelmed and stressed and have you scuttling back to the familiar habit that you don't know, thereby telling yourself, see, it is too hard. I can't do it. I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. So I'm going to invite you to start to look at it differently. Look at your comfort zone. And when you step into recovery or freedom, as I like to call it, you just want to expand it. And you want to expand it slightly. And you want to stay in that new expanded comfort zone for a reasonable period of time. Now, not for too long, okay? Because we want to go a little bit further. But once you know that actually I can do this, and it's already feeling automatic, and that other association, that other behavior pattern, that other automatic negative thought or ant that I had, I've just noticed I'm not doing it. I haven't got it. When you recognize that, and it is like an aha, you suddenly go, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. I haven't thought that thought anymore. That's when you're ready to expand a little bit more. So what we don't want to do is expand and just stop and go, there we go, that's it, this'll do. No, we want to go, okay, right, I'm ready for the next. I'm ready for the next expansion. And we can keep on doing that so that we can deal with one thing at a time, the stuff that is going to allow us to achieve what it is that we want, from letting go of the stuff that is harming us. Now, I can't tell you what that is because it's different for everybody. For some of my clients, it will be around alcohol, and it will just be, I will know when I have gone as far as I need to go, because I can go to a party, I can go to a dinner party, I can go to a celebration or have Christmas or New Year, and I don't even bat an eyelid about being the only person who's not drinking. It just goes over my head. That is freedom. That is what I call infinite freedom. They're just totally neutral. You can drink. I'm not fussed. I really couldn't care less. It's not even something that even crosses my mind anymore. The same with smoking. Now, when you get to that place, do you need to keep on expanding? Well, you don't have to in those areas, but if there is something that you would like, and that you know that you are kind of stopping yourself from having, then yeah, you can keep it expanding, but just in a different area. So it may well be that you've now lost this need to have alcohol to be able to cope with stress and your worries about what people think of you. But your next step may be that you want to go out and start creating a different group of friends that do a different activity that's new to you. And perhaps you're scared or worried about showing up on your own. And those old thoughts of, oh God, what will people think of me, might crop up. And that's where you can start to expand your comfort zone in exactly the same way, but in a different area, which means that you can start to get curious. And this is the thing, right? Cure is in curiosity. What we are capable of, none of us actually know, right? But what I do know is the majority of us stay here because our brain's trying to protect us, and that is all it's trying to do, right? It's not trying to hack you off. It's not trying to deliberately be an obstacle in your way to having the life and the health and the looks and the fitness that you want. That is not what your brain is doing. It wants you to feel safe. It wants you to survive, to stay alive. And it really doesn't care if the behavior patterns that you keep on repeating are helpful to you in terms of how you think and feel about yourself or not. It's not interested. It just needs to know you keep doing this thing. Temporarily, it makes you feel better and it makes you feel calmer. Therefore, you obviously need it to survive. So keep on doing it. But when we can shift what that thing is that is familiar and makes us feel calm, and the brain connects to keeping us alive because we must need it to survive, because it helps us to feel good, then we can expand. We just need to shift what that thing is. And that's where it's very difficult to work that out for yourself. And working with somebody who understands what your thought processes are, who understands that you are going to say things like, I can't stop it. It's just who I am. And they can turn around and go, but actually, no, it's something that you do, but it isn't who you are, right? Anorexia isn't who you are. Restricting food is something that you do, and it's been given a name, but it's not who you are as a person. And you can change, but you have to decide that you're going to put some work and some effort into doing what it takes. And that means you got to get uncomfortable. If we expand this comfort zone, even by a millimeter or two, it's by default no longer going to be comfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable will not kill you. Uncomfortable is not going to be the thing that is going to stop you from doing what you need to do. And if you want to have the life that you say you want, and most of the people who come to me tell me that, they want so many things, but they don't feel that they can do them or have them because they are stopping themselves. And this is the thing, you are stopping you through fear, through what your thoughts are telling you, and through how it's making you physically feel. And that is real. And I'm not going to say that those feelings of anxiety and when you have a panic attack, that is absolutely real. Okay. And I'm so don't get the idea that I'm saying it's nothing. It's not. But you can learn how to manage that. And the more you practice it and the more you recognize that you can tame those emotions, that you can start to be better at regulating your nervous system. It is a skill that you can practice, but you have to keep repeating it, just like you did if you were learning to drive. You didn't just have 1 or 2 lessons and then go, that's it, I can't drive. It's too hard. Or maybe you did, I don't know. But hopefully you didn't. If you are driving now, you went, you know what, this is hard, but I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on going until I master it. And that is the key. People who get infinite freedom repeat the same thoughts, positive ones, not the ants, not the automatic negative ones. They reframe them. They utilize certain sentences that will get them back on track. They keep on working on that expansion and reminding themselves that I can change, that I do deserve, that I am worth it, that I'm doing this because I want to no longer feel how I am currently feeling. And the only way you can do that is to get uncomfortable. And it's not forever. This is the beauty. It doesn't last forever. You're not in recovery. I don't believe you're in recovery forever. I believe I am recovered, right? Because I've done the work. I've done it repeatedly. Would I say I was in recovery for the first 5 years? Yes. At least. Why? Because I had so much to learn. When you let go of one thing, something else often pops up and then you have to deal with that. And that is perfectly normal. And that's why it's a journey and it's a process. And to turn around and say that, you can just stop something just like that when you are addicted to something and you've been doing it for a number of years, you're not going to drop it overnight. Okay, you might be able to do that through willpower and determination for a short period of time. But unless you deal with how to manage your own emotions and understand what your thoughts are and be able to change them and help yourself to think and feel in a different way about things and to therefore act differently, when you can stop suppressing your emotions and recognize it's okay to have feelings. We all have them. We might not be able to name them, and that doesn't matter. Sometimes I just have a feeling and I just want to let out a sound and I just want to let out noise. And that is just a sense of release and relief. Sometimes it may be that I want to just punch. Sometimes I want to jump up and down. Sometimes I just want to go, right? And those are the things that will help me to recognize there is something going on. There is some stress. There is some thought. There is an emotion in there. I'm not necessarily sure what it is. Does it matter? It needs to come out, because me pretending that everything is fine, me pretending that all is well, just means that I am more likely to turn to patterns of behavior and thinking that do not make me feel good and make me, in the long term, less able to cope with those similar thoughts and feelings when they come around. So, some practical things that you can do, right? And honestly, the best thing that you can start to practice to help yourself is to, first of all, be aware of what is the action and then what are the things that I'm telling myself just before I do it. Because you have to know, first of all, you can't change anything until you know what it is. So you have to know, what is the process? What am I doing? And then you can ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid? And get honest, right? Because this is just for you. Ideally, if you're working with somebody, you would share this stuff with somebody, because often what we think is what we're trying to avoid, it's something else. But initially, what is it that I'm avoiding? Okay, if you're picking up a phone and you're distracting yourself, well, chances are it's because you're avoiding doing something hard. Yeah. And oftentimes, particularly if you have an issue like anorexia or bulimia or an exercise addiction, and you push yourself hard, there's a belief that you should keep pushing through and doing hard things. And so we've got to get really, really honest with, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because it's hard? Right? And actually, when I do things and I make it hard for myself, I've got a story that goes along with that I deserve more praise and more validation because I chose the harder path. And we've got to help you to recognize no one cares. No one's going to give you more validation or more praise just because you made it as hard for yourself as you could. Okay, but there's a story, and it's a powerful one that can run for many people. Often doing hard things actually does give you what it is you need. It gives you a dopamine injection that will last actually quite a long time. So we have to look at then, is there an underlying reason why you need that amount of dopamine and why you need to keep doing hard things? And sometimes the answer is yes, there is a biological, chemical, physiological reason why you need to do that. And this is why I said the thing is not always the thing. But what am I avoiding? Usually it's avoiding a thought or a feeling that you're anticipating is going to come up or that you've already got. And you need to just say, okay, what happens? What happens if I just practice sitting in this feeling? And you put a timer on, or you watch the second hand go around. I'm looking at my watch because it's got a second hand, for 90 seconds. And you can just literally get fixated on that second hand if you need to. But after 90 seconds, I can guarantee you that original feeling that you were scared of or that you didn't like and you wanted to get rid of quickly, it will have dissipated. Because emotions are just energy, right? And they will flow and they will keep on moving and they will keep on flowing. But if you catch it and you grab onto it and you stick to it like glue and you make it bigger because you're focusing on it, therefore you're amplifying it, that feeling's not going to dissipate anytime soon. And then you're going to tell yourself, I can't get rid of this feeling. Well, you can, you just won't let it go. And so this is where letting things go is about you recognizing that it's okay to feel feelings. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. The more you focus on how uncomfortable you feel, the longer you will feel uncomfortable. So just allow yourself to notice it, almost like an observer, and sit with it, and then get on with doing the thing that you said either was too hard or that you couldn't do, or do something completely different because you now no longer need to do the thing that you were telling yourself you had to do. Stop and pause. I can't emphasize how important that is. Stop, pause, and breathe. Give yourself that space to ask yourself, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I avoiding? What do I need to do? And oftentimes the answer is nothing. Okay, it may be that you just need to do nothing. Sometimes you may just need to take action, and it may be that you just need to move, or you need to, like I said, make a noise. Right? So sometimes for me it's literally jumping up and down, running on the spot, doing jumping jacks, making a sound, just literally whatever it is that you need to do. It may be practicing different types of breath work. It might be that you need to energize yourself with some fast breathing. It might be that you need to calm yourself down with some slower breathing, like 5 counts in, 5 counts out, or a box breath, 4 counts in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, 4 count hold. Practice doing something that keeps your brain occupied, that is body occupied, i.e. breath work. You're thinking about what you're doing, but your body is actually doing the thing. That way, you are helping yourself to feel more in charge of the change. You can do it if you decide you want to. There is always going to be this, okay? There's always going to be something that is going to cost you. There's got to be a cost and a benefit, right? And you have to ask yourself, what is it costing me to stay as I am? What is it costing me to not put in the effort to change? What is it costing me to not do what I need to do to get what it is that I say that I want? What is that cost to me emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically? And maybe write that down as an exercise. Just what is the cost? And then look at on the other side, what will it cost me to change? Will it cost me a relationship? I don't know. Will it cost me a friendship? It might. I don't know. If you're talking about drinking and drugs, will you have to distance yourself from certain people? Potentially, yes. If your partner is enabling you to have an eating disorder or does drink or drugs or gambling with you, then potentially you're going to have to put in some very clear and hard boundaries and learn to be very, very strong and resilient quite quickly, or question, do you need to distance yourself from that partner until you've given yourself some space to get that sense of resilience and know how to put those boundaries in place? And sometimes that is what people do. That's why retreats work really, really well, because you can have the space away from your normal environment and you can just focus on learning the skill set that you need, so that when you go back into the environment where potentially there is an enabler there, you know how to handle it and you feel confident in being able to continue what you started when you were in a rehab type of scenario. The thing is, there are always options, but you have to look at what are the cost benefits. What is the cost of me staying the same? What are the benefits of me changing? And what are the costs of me changing? And what are the benefits of me changing? And I'm going to invite you to do that as an exercise. Just literally get 2 pieces of paper, and write on the left-hand side, costs of staying the same. And on the right-hand side, benefits of changing. And then on another piece of paper, cost of changing. And again, benefits of changing. Oh, look, there's 2 columns that both say benefits of changing. And this is where I want you to recognize there is only a positive from change if you are not happy with where you are. If you're perfectly happy with what you're doing, then this episode's not been any use to you anyway. My guess is, though, that if you're listened up until this point, you're not happy with who you are being and how you're behaving. And therefore you do want to change, but you are scared and you think you can't do it. And I'm here to tell you, you can, but you need to do it in a way that is possible and feels doable for you. And it is not one size fits all. It's going to be different for everybody, which is why having a conversation with me or with somebody like me who can help you to work out what you need to do as your first steps is the most important thing to do. And there's a link in the show notes and in the description if you're watching on YouTube as to how you can connect with me. I would love you to do that, folks. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, I highly recommend that you do. And if you are not sure whether you even want to have a conversation with me, but want to find out a little bit more about my story, then feel free to jump onto my website and have a little read about me. You can also have a little listen to some of the past episodes of the podcast where I have shared in detail more of my story. And I've also got it in my book, Thrive Not Strive, which is over there somewhere. It's Women Thrive on Amazon. And I'll put that link in the show notes as well. Folks, we only have one life as far as we know, and one body. Look after it because it is looking after you. Until next time, please do take care of yourselves. Thank you. Oh, forgot to say, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And if you have liked this episode, please do give me a thumbs up and a like. If you think that this will be useful to somebody else that you know, please do point them in the direction of it so that they can have a listen too. Thank you.